On November 26, 2002, the world of video games was rocked by the announcement of a merger between two industry giants, Square and Enix. While imagination soared at the possibility of what these two companies could come up with as one entity, a collaboration of sorts had already happened 8 years earlier. In 1995, the best minds behind Enix's Dragon Quest and Square's Final Fantasy joined up to form the RPG Dream Team and release one of the best games of the genre that is still cherished 30 years later. Stay here for the story of Chrono Trigger. On March 11, 1995, Chrono Trigger was released for the Super Famicom in Japan, a game that for almost a decade prior was on everyone's wish lists, even if you didn't think about it because you didn't expect it to ever be possible. Chrono Trigger was a collaboration of the biggest names in the Japanese role-playing game genre: Yuji Horii, Hironobu Sakaguchi, and Akira Toriyama. Many other influential names were part of the project, but these three names alone were jaw-dropping when the first announcements of the game were made, namely because the staff were from two different companies, and rivals at that. All of the elements that led to Chrono Trigger began to form about 10 years before its release. In 1985, Yuji Horii, working under publisher Enix, brought the PC-88 game, The Port Pier Serial Murder Case, to the Nintendo family computer. The game sold moderately well, starting a trend of slower-paced games that involved deep strategy with heavy doses of dialogue, a departure from the faster action games that defined the early days of the family computer. That success inspired Horii to move further in this direction, developing a family computer game similar to role-playing games like Ultima and Wizardry, Dragon Quest. First released on May 27, 1986. The game was a simplified version of sword and sorcery games that had existed in the PC space for some time. A menu of simple commands removed the need for a keyboard, while interactions with characters in towns drove the story. To make Dragon Quest a fuller experience and bring name value to the project, two outsiders were drafted. Famed composer Koichi Sugiyama would score the game. His previous work in movies and TV, including Gatchaman and Cyborg 009, were well known among the key age group that loved video games. Manga artist Akira Toriyama signed on as a graphic designer. His most recent work, Dragon Ball, was an extremely popular manga series, with a respective anime debuting a few months before Dragon Quest. Through Dragon Ball and prior works, Toriyama had crafted a trademark style, one that fit well into the world of video games. Dragon Quest would become the first RPG experience for many, and set the template for what every game of the genre would be afterwards. The success of Dragon Quest set off a stampede of RPGs that arrived in 1987, trying to cash in on the success Enix had. Out of the many entries that came from that first wave, Final Fantasy by Square stood out as an ambitious game, one that sold close to 500,000 copies. The team at Square was led by Hironobu Sakaguchi and a close staff of designers, composers, and programmers who built Final Fantasy into a respectable franchise. With new entries year after year, Square would wind up as the number 2 RPG maker in Japan, behind Enix. Most role-playing game fans had both DQ and FF, as well as games made by others. The excitement of the times led to debates, comparisons, and blue sky dreaming. When asking which series was better, or if Square could ever take the lead, there was always one question. What if Dragon Quest mixed it up with Final Fantasy? What would it be like? Who would make the decisions? Who would lead the project? Which company would publish the game? What would it look like, sound like, play like? And on and on and on. What fans at home didn't know was that the answer would be here sooner than we all thought. By the 90s, a clear rivalry had formed with Team Dragon Quest on one side and Team Final Fantasy on the other. Within the industry itself, the competition was fierce, but there was a mutual respect among those who made the games. As such, Yuji Horii and Hironobu Sakaguchi would cross paths from time to time and become friends. In the fall of 1992, members of both the Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy teams had traveled to America for seminars and workshops on the next generation of graphic design. While there, Horii, Sakaguchi, and Akira Toriyama discussed the possibilities of a collaboration, a Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy crossover, combining the best talent from each series, creating, perhaps, the ultimate game, and giving the fans something they had always dreamed of, but never thought possible. What allowed for this theoretical arrangement were the stark differences in the corporate and managerial structures of Enix and Square. The number of proper employees Enix had was very small. The company outsourced their work to independent contractors in nearly every case. This kept Enix running lean without the expensive overhead of salaried employees or large offices. Those who were contracted by Enix liked this arrangement, as it allowed for programmers to bid individually on work rather than accept a monthly salary, as well as to freely seek out other jobs somewhere else after each contract. Yuji Horii, the man who created Dragon Quest and stood at the helm for each entry, was an independent contractor, not an employee of Enix. He had founded his own company, Armor Project, in 1985, which holds all the rights to Dragon Quest. The first game, as well as most Enix games from those early days, were programmed by Chunsoft, leaving Enix with little work to do other than manufacture cartridges, ship them out, then promote the games, all of which was also outsourced. Square ran their operations in a more traditional manner. Their game creators were permanent employees, and the most successful ones, Hironobu Sakaguchi included, eventually earned executive positions. Everything at Square was done in-house. Close relationships were forged amongst the staff. The core Final Fantasy team remained virtually unchanged in the early days, while fostering the next generation to take the reins in the future. This difference in arrangements meant that anyone from the Enix side could work with the Square side at any time without any contractual dispute. By the time the idea was being tossed around in October 1992, Final Fantasy had expanded to 4 games, with one on the way, and 2 spin-offs, Saga and Mana, which carried the Final Fantasy name in the US. Sakaguchi held the title of Executive Vice President of Square and had the authority to commission projects that he could also lead the production of. All of it led to a simple contract for Yuji Horii and Akira Toriyama to sign, and the project was born. From the onset, a few ground rules were laid down. First, the game would officially be a Square production. The members from Enix would be treated as equal partners, each carrying their own share. The project would be kept secret until the game was almost complete, as news of this collaboration would have driven the media and fans crazy, and therefore had to be immediately backed up with results. Most importantly, the game should not resemble either Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy, and ideally would be a game that no one had ever done before. While these men were researching in America, a new phrase had entered the American lexicon, the Dream Team, in reference to the 1992 U.S. men's Olympic basketball team, which featured NBA players for the first time. Sakaguchi et al. Liked the name so much, they fashioned it for themselves. The RPG Dream Team. While these initial rules were set in stone, the ideas that led to the final version of Chrono Trigger were in constant flux. It took months to get the project off the ground, while those other famous Square games of 1993 and 94 were concurrently being developed. In early 1993, Kazuhiko Aoki, a designer from Final Fantasy III, took on the role of producer. Yuji Horii was the head writer, creating all scenarios. Hironobu Sakaguchi was credited as designer, while Akira Toriyama was the lead artist, putting his mark on landscapes, enemies, and character profiles. Takashi Tokita and Yoshinori Kitase directed the game, having worked on Final Fantasy IV and VI, respectively. Nobuo Uematsu would contribute a few songs to the soundtrack, though work was divided between him and Yasunori Mitsuda, whom Uematsu would mentor. Mitsuda would become well known in his own right years later. Each member of the Dream Team had their own duties, assisted by younger Square staff, who would go on to become well-known names in the future. Over 50 people were involved in the group, referred to as Dream Project. Keeping with the ground rule of not imitating Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger was suggested as an installment of the Mana series. At the time, Secret of Mana was nearing completion, and a game that followed in that style, possibly a sequel, was considered. For a time, the game was intended for the Super Famicom CD-ROM. With Akira Toriyama's trademark art style, animation would have been a key highlight. But the future of a Nintendo CD was never certain, and in the end, never came to pass. With important decisions like this needed to be determined from the start, the idea of a CD-ROM was abandoned in favor of a 24 megabit cartridge. The game went through several revisions, with ideas coming and going, including segments of the game completely discarded, then starting over, all in the name of crafting the perfect game. What survived were a few familiar ideas. A 3-player party similar to Secret of Mana and Dragon Quest V. The active time battle system, seen in many Square games since 1991, and a graphical style echoing Final Fantasy VI. Similar lighting, shading, and tones can be seen throughout, giving a comfortable sense of familiarity to Square fans. There were, however, many new elements that kept true to the vision of delivering a game that would be a wholly new experience. The story would involve time travel. The main character, Chrono, would travel to the past and future throughout the quest. The overhead map would change between eras, but still be the same world. Events in the past would alter the future and lead to different outcomes with multiple endings. There would be a robust cast of characters, but only 7 that are playable, most of them hailing from different eras in time, all joining together to save the world as the story unfolds. With each character, interactions with townspeople can be different, thanks to something known as active time event logic. This system creates conversations that feel more realistic than the usual one-line messages from characters met along the way. The party itself is also customizable after a certain point. This adds to a less linear style of game. Different character combinations may work better than others. Each of the 3 members can also align for combined attacks, with 15 triple attacks in total. It's up to you to unlock the correct combination. Gameplay elements were implemented to keep the game's pace moving along, avoiding the pitfalls nearly every RPG falls into. There would be no random battles. Enemies appear on screen, and the battle only begins when engaging them. Some battles are story-related and therefore inescapable, but the lack of random battles allows for more free exploration and lets the game move along at the player's chosen pace. Each leg of the quest is divided up like chapters of a book. That had been done before, but with 32 stages to the game, each step has a clear and focused objective that must be met before moving on to the next one. There are options to go off to the side and explore as much as you'd like, but nothing in the game requires you to walk halfway across the world just to pick something up and bring it back for the sake of filling up time in the game. Each of the chapters in the game is remarked on the save file to show you how far you've come from the start. A nice detail. At a certain point in the game, Chrono and company can reach the end of time, a safe zone that acts as a hub for the party, a place to heal, save, and regroup. At certain stages of the game, hints about what to do next can be learned here as well, in an effort to keep players from getting stuck or having to buy a strategy guide. After the main quest is completed, the game can still continue with a feature called New Game Plus, where items and status can carry over to a new game, which helps encounter every line of text and experience every ending. While not exactly a new feature, Chrono Trigger contains several mini-games. Most of these are short, quick-time events that offer items. A full racing game featuring Mode 7 graphics is playable while visiting the future, a fun and graphically impressive way to spend some time away from the main quest. The entirety of Chrono Trigger, from a vague idea to final product, took 2.5 years. About 6 months before release day, when things were looking close to finished, Square made an appearance at V-Jump Magazine's 1994 V-Festival. Members of Dream Project took the stage to reveal their hard work for the first time. Hironobu Sakaguchi explained how the Dream Team came together, as well as each person's role and how the last 2 years of game development had gone, while Yuji Horii added his own personal anecdotes. The scene was unthinkable. News of the crossover soon spread across Japan and the world. In Japan, Chrono Trigger soon appeared in Famitsu Magazine's Most Wanted charts, where it and Dragon Quest VI often occupied the top 2 spots. After V-Fest 94, there was still much work to do, including one major change made after the initial announcement. The cartridge size was increased from 24 megabits to 32. At the time, the largest RPG ever. The game also had one of the heaviest price tags, 11,400 yen, just over $130 at the time. Would all that hard work, as well as a record-breaking price of entry, be worth it? On March 11th, 1995, everyone would find out. the day Chrono Trigger, the dream game featuring the creators of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, would come home.
"伝説がプレイステーションで動き出す」「ドリームプロジェクト完全版クロノトリガー」
In the present day, the year 1000 has begun. In the kingdom of Guardia, celebrations are being held in a grand event, the Millennial Fair. During the festivities, a young boy, Chrono, becomes friends with Marl, a village girl he's never seen before today. Together, they go to visit Chrono's friend Luca, who is demonstrating her newest invention, a teleportation device. When Marl volunteers to use the telepod, things go awry. Her pendant glows, and somehow, she's sent backwards through time. Chrono takes the pendant and goes back to the past. Marl and Chrono have landed in the year 600, where Marl is mistaken for Lean, the reigning queen of this era. The real queen has vanished, with no explanation. As for Marl taking her place, there must be a family resemblance. Marl is actually Princess Nadia of the royal family in the present day, and therefore a descendant of Lean. In trying to determine the whereabouts of Lean, Chrono and his friends cross paths with Frog, a talking amphibian who was once human but is now cursed to animal form. Together, they discover, then rescue, the missing queen. All the while, Luca has been tinkering with a device that will open the gates of time where holes in the continuum exist. The Gate Key. When the past is set back on the right track, everyone heads back home. It's not a happy homecoming. Chrono is arrested for kidnapping Marl, who was the princess all along. At the trial, evidence is used against Chrono and he is sentenced to be executed. Truly innocent, or at least that he had honest intentions, Chrono knows the trial was bogus and plots an escape. Luca and Marl join in to help him. However, being found guilty of treason, the only way out is through time once again. The three arrive in the far-off future, the year 2300. The world has changed a lot, clearly falling into a dark age. Initially, Chrono doesn't know why. Through exploration of the area, he encounters advanced technology. Computers, jet bikes, and genetically modified creatures, as well as the catalyst that made the world in this era the way it is. The world as they knew it was destroyed by an entity known as Lavos in the year 1999. Luca discovers a way back home in a place called the Protodome, where she discovers a broken robot, R66Y, whom she repairs and is renamed Robo by Chrono. Once operational again, Robo takes everyone to the nearest time gate. Before leaving, other robots of the same build as Robo tell him he is defective for aiding humans and is destroyed. Luca is able to rebuild him once again, and with no reason to stay in 2300, Robo joins Chrono for the journey back. The time gate takes everyone to the end of time, a place where time and space meet, a place that exists outside of the continuum. With this discovery, Chrono will always have a place for his friends and him to escape and stay safe if things ever went wrong. To reach the year 600, the three must head back to where the Millennial Fair was held. Along the way, it appears that each version of the events in this time have still happened, as evidenced by Chrono's mom worrying about all the trouble he has been making. Arriving in 600, Chrono discovers that the king has been injured in battle, and while in recovery, speaks of a legendary hero who has arrived to defeat Magus. The hero's name is Tata. He crosses paths with Chrono while both are searching for the Masamune sword, the only weapon powerful enough to stop Magus. It turns out that Tata is regarded as the legendary hero because he wears a Medal of Bravery, which, in reality, belongs to Frog, who left it behind at a cafe. Chrono and friends receive the Masamune sword, but only the blade, while Frog is in possession of the hilt. The sword can be repaired, but doing so requires the rare red rock. With none in easy supply in Frog's time, the team heads all the way back to 65 million BC. In that prehistory, the world is populated by talking lizards called reptites. One human, Ayla, befriends Chrono and provides the red rock, but nobody can return back because the gate key has been stolen by the Reptites. One thing the future doesn't need is another invasion. The key is being held by Azala, who sends forth the strongman Nizbel to send Chrono packing. The fight doesn't go the way Azala planned, and just the display of power from Chrono forces Azala to give up the key. The Masamune sword is as good as new, giving Frog a huge upgrade. Now the three heroes can face off against Magus, who in the year 600 is now attempting to summon Lavos. Even with the Masamune, the battle to stop Magus is very intense. Lavos' arrival creates a time gate that sends everyone back to 65 million BC once more. Magus is nowhere to be found. There are more urgent matters as Lavos makes his arrival. After a discussion with Ayla, Chrono and company realize that Lavos might just be the asteroid that crashed to Earth and ended the age of the dinosaurs. The impact made by Lavos opens a new time gate. 12,000 BC, the Dark Ages, is on the other side. In this era, magic exists, with those who can wield it known as the Enlightened Ones, who live on a floating kingdom in the sky. These people tell Chrono of the Mammon machine, which is being used by Queen Zeal to summon Lavos. Also, Marl's pendant once belonged to Zeal's daughter, Shala, and can gain power from the Mammon machine. Eventually, Zeal captures Chrono and sentences him to death, only to be sprung free by Shala, who knows her mother has been consumed by evil. Upon leaving the Dark Ages, the time gate to this age is sealed. And the only way back is to return to 65 million BC and then to 2300, where a fully working time machine, the Epic, is discovered. Back in the Dark Ages, Chrono meets the Earthbound Ones, those who live on the surface. Here it's discovered that Melchior, who Chrono knew from his own time, is the Guru of Life, one of three men who are stationed across time, and the inventor of the Mammon machine. Realizing his creation is too dangerous, Melchior entrusts Chrono with the ruby knife, the only tool that can dismantle it. When Chrono finds the Mammon machine, he uses the ruby knife, only to come face to face with Lavos. Everyone hangs on for dear life when Magus reveals himself, only to find out that he too is quickly overpowered. Chrono musters up enough strength for one more attack, but it does no good. Chrono is atomized. No trace of him is left behind. The battle forces the floating kingdom to crash into the ground, causing a cataclysmic tidal wave that forever reshapes the world. Traveling back to the end of time, the survivors meet with Gaspar, secretly the Guru of Time, who hands them the Chrono Trigger, a magical egg that can bring someone back from the dead. Only Balthazar, the Guru of Reason, knows how to use it. The final hope in bringing Chrono back to life, to stop Lavos, and to bring history back to its correct track. Depending on your actions, the past, present, and future can change. But there is one definitive bad ending, causing the world to come to an end because the future refused to change. And one definitive good ending, where the timeline is corrected and everything is back to the way it was, which is the only way it should ever be.
13年の時を経て、今再び時は動き出す。任天堂 DS クロノトリガー。
On the day Chrono Trigger went on sale, March 11th, 1995, the mood in the gaming world was at a fevered pitch. Great role-playing games had been coming left and right, but that was only one part of a larger scene, where the best games of all genres arrived in large numbers, coinciding with the end of the 16-bit era and the dawn of the next generation. A time looked back on today as the apex of 2D game design, perhaps the greatest era of video games ever. Now, the greatest minds behind Japan's two biggest series have come together for a once-in-a-lifetime collaboration. There is truly no way to properly explain the excitement. You just had to be there. At a price of 11,400 yen, Chrono Trigger was one of the most expensive home video games ever, though very few winced at the cost of entry to play the dream game. The first week of sales led to record numbers. The sales rankings Famitsu used in the 90s were not national totals, but a cross-section of 19 retailers across Japan. Just these shops that were surveyed sold almost 200,000 copies in just 2 days. The game immediately debuted at number 1 on the game charts, staying on top for 3 weeks. In March 1995, Famitsu magazine issued a cross-review score of 34 out of 40 for Chrono Trigger. The reviewer said that with such fast-moving battle scenes, Chrono Trigger could be mistaken for an action RPG, with plenty of events that keep the game from getting boring, though it gets very difficult in the second half. The game immediately gives off the impression of being fun, but with the story and in-game mechanics, the mood shifts to a game that is also interesting. And the entire story is reminiscent of Back to the Future. And despite that, Chrono isn't pedantic. Famitsu continued to cover Chrono Trigger in March and April 1995, offering detailed maps, hints, and strategies. The Dream game stayed in the top 30 for several months, dropping out after July 24th, eventually selling over 2 million copies in Japan. Chrono Trigger went on sale in the US in August 1995. In the Nintendo sphere, the next generation was delayed, now coming over a year after Sega and Sony. Much of Nintendo's marketing in 1995 focused on the here and now, letting 16-bit games shine, leaving next-gen to the future. Chrono Trigger landed in the middle of several games that pushed the Super NES to the limit. Yoshi's Island, Diddy's Kong Quest, Killer Instinct, and Doom were just a handful of the many games released in the second half of 1995, leading to fierce competition at retail then and an amazing best-of list in retrospect. The American game media came out in full force with positive reviews across the board. Electronic Gaming Monthly issued a score of 37 out of 40 in its August 1995 issue, the highest rating for any game since Donkey Kong Country the year before. The EGM review crew called Chrono Trigger a thrill to play with superb graphics, gripping plot, and an excellent engine, beating Final Fantasy III in both graphics and music. That it was the RPG fans don't need to be told is a must-have, but those who don't dig the genre should still give it a try. GamePro gave a perfect score in its September 95 issue. The Pro review praised the replay value of the new Game Plus system, the multiple endings, and interchangeable characters, touching on key events while offering pro tips. GamePro said Chrono Trigger has great humor that runs from the obvious to the sublime, with innovative enemies, hypnotic special effects, impressive spells, and gorgeous, lush backgrounds. These outlets had a fair share of RPG cheerleaders in their readership and editorial ranks, but it was Nintendo Power that gave Chrono Trigger the biggest push, offering extensive detailed coverage in the summer and fall of 1995, including full character profiles, strategies, and full-size posters. The coverage commenced with an official player's guide, much like in the style that had been done recently for Final Fantasy III, and a mainstay for many games Nintendo developed themselves. Chrono Trigger sold over 300,000 copies in 1995, slightly less than Final Fantasy III, though still a huge number for a genre that was often dismissed as unpopular. The game also won multiple Best Ofs, including Best Music, Best RPG, and Best Super NES Game Awards from EGM, and 6 of them from Nintendo Power, the most of any game that year, including Best Story, Best Ending, and the big one, the best game of 1995. Back in Japan, the Dream game continued on, thanks to a new innovative system released not long after the original game, Satellaview. This Super Famicom add-on allowed for downloadable games delivered via satellite. Through Satellaview, the entire soundtrack could be played, along with a few unused tracks, alongside a character guide and bestiary that gave detailed stats of many things encountered in the game. The Jetbike minigame is now its own separate outing in Jetbike Special. The final expansion came in February 1996, Radical Dreamers, a full-sized text adventure. The game features 3 youths, Sergei, Kid, and Magil, who end up entangling themselves in the backstory of Chrono Trigger, searching for the Frozen Flame and Time Egg. Much like the source material, Radical Dreamers incorporates the new Game Plus system for multiple endings after the first run-through. At the 1996 V-Jump Festival, fans were surprised and impressed by a short Chrono Trigger anime OVA. Time and Space Adventures, New Mamonja, takes place in the year 1000, the night before the Millennial Fair. 2 monsters, Nu and Mamo, find their way to the fair where they try to recruit other monsters. When nobody joins, they crash the fair. The anime is lighthearted and comical, giving just enough of a window into a part of the world of Chrono Trigger we didn't get to see in the game. The short film was never sold commercially, though copies have appeared online in recent years for all to see. This was followed by a manga adaptation, which appeared in V-Jump magazine, with all strips compiled and published as a standalone book in 1998. After the Dream project ended, those involved from Square and Enix went back to their usual roles. Though there were many great games from both, Final Fantasy VII was far and away the most popular and newsworthy. One reason stems from the highly publicized divorce between Square and Nintendo, leading Square to release their games solely on the Sony PlayStation afterwards. With an amazing back catalog, Square went back and reissued older titles on the PlayStation. Chrono Trigger was included among these, arriving on November 2nd, 1999. Having the game on a CD-ROM allowed for fully animated opening and ending scenes, directed by Akira Toriyama. Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation was brought to the US along with Final Fantasy IV and sold as Final Fantasy Chronicles in 2001. Chrono Trigger for the PlayStation in Japan was positioned to prepare for a sequel, Chrono Cross, debuting on November 18, 1999. The story does not follow Chrono and his friends, instead focusing on Sergei and Kid from Radical Dreamers. Instead of time travel, Chrono Cross dwells on the concepts of multiple dimensions. The world of Chrono Cross is therefore the same as Chrono Trigger, just kind of on a different plane. Chrono Cross was updated for modern hardware in 2022, with Radical Dreamers included. Following Chrono Cross, the Dream game lay dormant for several years, until being brought back for the Nintendo DS in 2008. While the core game is the same, there are many enhancements that make the DS version very enjoyable. All on-screen menus were relocated to the lower screen, giving more room for the playfield on the top screen, allowing for more graphical detail. The lower screen also serves as an explorable map. Character speed can be set to run by default. There are new dungeons with much to explore and a new ending to unlock. Touch controls are now a feature, or you can stick with the original control scheme. In April 2003, Enix and Square formally entered into a corporate merger, with one company, Square Enix, existing thereafter, which still operates today. While nothing like Chrono Trigger ever came from Square Enix, some, but not all members of the Dream Team, reunited about a decade later for a new game series, Blue Dragon. Hironobu Sakaguchi had parted ways with Square Enix not too long after the merger, forming his own company, Mistwalker Studios. Akira Toriyama designed the characters and locations of the game, with Sakaguchi directing and Nobuo Uematsu composing. Blue Dragon was released for the Xbox 360 in 2006. The game features mechanics and gameplay that hark back to the good old days of RPGs, with turn-based battles and an overworld dungeon town setting, a contrast to open-world games without a need to level grind that had become more common in the 21st century. Blue Dragon sold over 200,000 copies in Japan, becoming the best-selling Xbox 360 game in the land of the rising sun. Two sequels followed on the Nintendo DS in 2008 and 2009. Today, Hironobu Sakaguchi continues to produce games through Mistwalker Studios. Prominent titles include The Last Story and Fantasian. Yuji Horii is still producing Dragon Quest, which is now up to its 12th installment, not to mention a slate of related spin-offs, including Theater Rhythm and Dragon Quest Builders. Akira Toriyama created dozens of manga series for Jump and produced several Dragon Ball TV series and films, which stand as his best-known work. He passed away on March 1st, 2024, at the age of 68. He is missed by all and will never be forgotten.
DS で再びクロノトリガー。
In 2019, Famitsu magazine conducted a survey on the best games of the Heisei era, 1989 to 2019. Chrono Trigger was ranked number 1. It makes sense in a way. You take the best minds from the most popular games, put them together to make a new adventure, and release that at the apex of one of the most beloved game machines in Japan, at a time when games from there were the gold standard, which then also coincided with our collective formative years, and, well, what else could you expect? But all I really said in that sentence were buzzwords, hype. It doesn't really mean anything, except that the hype of Chrono Trigger fully delivered. The game was great, and for a still mostly cartridge format world at the time, the size and scope of the game was massive and unmatched. Not to mention that it was just fun. There was just something special about that time and place that gave Chrono Trigger that certain feeling, one that's difficult to verbalize but can be felt right away. The other thing that gives that #1 ranking solid reasoning is that the Dream game truly was a once-in-a-lifetime collaboration. Sure, some members of Dream Project worked together afterwards, and the company itself today is Square and Enix put together. They could cross over any time, as much as they want, but it doesn't happen. I mean, who wouldn't like a video game Dream Team 2, 3, 4, or 5? But to have one adventure standing forever as the only time these revered artists formed an equal partnership to create the literal best game of the era made everything all that more special. That perfection was never tainted by trying to cash in on the waves it made. If you were part of the ride, I hope you enjoyed it, because it's over and it can never happen again. But in the end, that really is for the best, and the only way a dream project becoming reality should be remembered.